Welcome to another episode of This Is Why I Don't Vote, a podcast. Episode 13. Lucky number 13. Your new safe space to discuss sports, politics, social issues, and even religion. We are going to take it all very seriously, but not too seriously. Without further ado.
Act 1, COVID.
Yeah, I got my COVID shot. Like every other shot I've had over the course of the last 10 years, whether administered by a needle or by a glass. I didn't want to do it, but I gave in to peer pressure. As I stared at it, I knew that it had questionable origins. I knew that its quality control, its sourcing, was suspect. Like all of those other shots, it left me with a slight headache, disappointed. And like all those other shots I've taken, it left me resenting everyone involved. On the bright side, thankfully I didn't puke. I never thought I'd say this, but I much prefer succumbing to the peer pressure associated with my car and my money and my job, not being some lemming falling off a cliff with the rest over a vaccination. But like many of the other substances that I've consumed, inhaled, otherwise subjected my body to, I guess we'll see how it plays out in the next 5, 10, 15 years. As I have blathered on to you, dear listener, in previous episodes, I find that a lot of these social issues of the day, they help define who we really are, what we really believe. Although people try to qualify who they are, what they believe, with labels, with uniforms, you can see in action how their beliefs, their labels, their uniforms are often in conflict. COVID is an excellent example of this. You've probably all heard the term of art, politics makes strange bedfellows. COVID touches on politics, it touches on social issues, it touches on public health. COVID has certainly made strange bedfellows. And there's so many layers to it. People who 2 years ago would challenge how lax the approval process was employed by the FDA for new drugs hitting the market. People who demanded not 2 years ago higher, more stringent quality control standards in the production and distribution of different types of drugs. Many of these same people are now moving in lockstep with the government's position about these COVID vaccines, their efficacy, and how quickly people need to be vaccinated. How quickly these vaccines need to be distributed to the population. Certainly, the approval process that was once lambasted by so many, particularly on the left, that approval process was not followed and certainly wasn't heightened in light of the COVID pandemic. Certainly, quality control standards regarding the production and the distribution of these drugs was not adhered to, and certainly was not heightened in light of the COVID pandemic. This whole episode with the Johnson & Johnson vaccine is a testament to as much. Not only gone is any of that skepticism by so many of the people who were ardent, vocal advocates of a stronger, more proactive FDA. They have moved completely to the opposite side of the spectrum. Sadly, it appears that people have moved themselves into two camps and are trying to move the rest of us into these camps. Basically, pro-vaccination or anti-vaccination. I don't have a lot of faith in this rushed product to market that we've been given as a COVID vaccine. I also don't have a lot of faith in the quality control processes that were employed to ensure the efficacy of these vaccines and the quality of these vaccines. But I got the shot anyway. Getting that shot to me was like wearing a mask. I didn't like it. Wasn't something I particularly supported. But in the end, if by some small personal measure I can help shorten, lessen the severity, the duration, the impact of COVID, I'll do it. I'm adhering to the social contract that we all have as citizens of this country, as members of this planet. But I certainly can appreciate if not respect, those that have legitimate concerns about this virus and legitimate concerns about the vaccines. One legitimate concern is specific to this quote-unquote data. Our medical professionals and their review of the data. Let's talk about that. In 2013, there was an outbreak of a virus called Ebola. Yes, I'm giving you a history lesson. The history lesson is important. Follow along for a second. I may throw in a dick joke. The Ebola outbreak was in Western Africa. We tend to forget that the quote-unquote outbreak actually started in 2013, but wasn't really appreciated by health organizations all over the world until early 2014, when many of the World Health Organizations, particularly from the West, became aware of how virulent the Ebola virus was in this current outbreak, how deadly it was. They sent all the aid, all the resources that they could muster in short order. Doctors from all over the world came to West Africa to help in this effort. But something happened specifically that actually did make the news, that was part of the news cycle, but then very quickly went away. As Ebola spread in West Africa, in very poor areas, Western doctors noticed that medical healthcare workers, whether they were doctors, whether they were nurses, whether they were orderlies, whether they were just manual labor helping move bodies from point A to point B, Western professionals noticed that no matter the diagnosis, these casualties, these deaths, were being listed under Ebola. Western medical professionals were obviously astonished. How can we properly track the spread of Ebola? How can we properly track the virulence of Ebola? How can we properly track the deadly nature of this Ebola virus if everyone that comes in here is diagnosed with the Ebola virus? If every death is diagnosed as being caused by Ebola? You can imagine now Western doctor lecture much going into one of these makeshift hospitals with a doctor from Liberia or Sierra Leone who's been working 60, 70, 80 hours straight, without any sleep, and saying, look, you need to do a better job of record keeping here. You need to do a better job at diagnosing what these people truly have, who's sick from what, who's passing away from what, so that we can better understand this Ebola outbreak. What do you think that doctor from Liberia or Sierra Leone had to say to Dr. Lecturemuch? We're doing what we can do. We are doing what we can do under the circumstances. Well, Western Dr. Lecturemuch, he wagged a finger. It'll make it harder for us to truly understand what's happening here. The data was collected as best was possible under the circumstances at the time. Eventually, the Ebola virus outbreak was contained. Is that little mouse wheel in your head spinning yet? When COVID hit in January, February, particularly March of 2020, the medical profession did not have a sufficient number of tests to test everyone. We all know this to be the truth. Working into the months of July, August, September, states and medical facilities were scrambling to get COVID tests. The market responded. Tests were flooding the market. You could buy tests all over the place. The problem was there was no reliability in any of these tests. There was no quality control in many of the tests that were obtained by states, by municipalities, and by medical facilities. Story after story about people who were testing false positive, people testing negative and then getting sick from COVID, states, municipalities, medical facilities, finding out that the tests that they had bought, that 100,000, that 250,000, that 500,000 tests, were completely unreliable. There was no quality control between one test or the other. If you knew personally medical professionals in the field working during the COVID pandemic all of them were very upfront and honest. The record keeping is abysmal. So many people were coming into emergency rooms. So many people were being admitted to hospitals. The record keeping suffered. Doctors, nurses, administrators were marking off COVID, marking off COVID, marking off COVID. In addition, in areas that had a limited number of COVID tests, you had to test negative for every other ailment before you would even get a COVID test. Again, some of those people tested negative for COVID and had COVID. You didn't hear anything from Western Doctor Lecture much, did you? Because Western Doctor Lecture much, well, he was knee deep in it. And then he was neck deep in it. The focus became on patient care and patient management, not on accurate record keeping. You've heard me say it before, dear listener, and I'll say it again. We don't learn lessons, do we? So when I hear that the powers that be are reviewing the data, that does not instill confidence in me. Certainly we're doing, as a nation, a much better job at patient management and at data management. But we're talking about a pandemic that manifested roughly 12 months ago, 14 months ago, maybe the outside range being 15 months ago. You need every ounce of accurate data that you can collect. And we don't have accurate data for at least the first 6 months of the pandemic. I'd much prefer the government, the powers that be, to be honest, to be forthcoming, and admit as much. Hey, we're taking a lot of educated guesses here. But frankly, that's not what people want. People want to be reassured in a time of crisis, regardless of whether or not the information underlying that assurance is accurate. Sadly, again, we don't learn lessons, and the reason why we don't learn lessons is because we don't have very good recall of the things that have happened to us not 1 year ago. So politicians, so healthcare administrators, so scientists, these people have very little exposure by way of the things they say or do. It's easy to look at a virus outbreak in another country, another part of the world, and put those people into a them category. That wouldn't happen to us. That's only going to happen to those them. It's a shitty shoe to wear, because now it is certainly on the other foot.
Act 2 Little Timmy Tebow.
Little Timmy Tebow is back. Back in the league. I actually don't think this is a stupid move. As a fan of the New York Metropolitans, one of the more popular jerseys to be sold over the course of the last 5 years was, yes, one little Timmy Tebow. North Florida loves them some Timmy Tebow. As a former alum of the University of Florida, Gainesville not being that far away from Jacksonville, North Florida loves them some little Timmy Tebow. You go and you put him into some H-back, slot back position, let him throw that football once or twice a season, you'll sell out that entire stadium for 17 games. From a business standpoint, it simply makes sense. As a fan, I think it's an absolute joke. Tim Tebow's career is like the resurrection of Jesus, coming back from the dead. Tebow's been able to do it twice. Jesus could only do it once. Shamelessly, the Mets allowed him to play in their minor leagues for probably a season, if not 2 seasons, too long. And here he is, having never played tight end, getting the opportunity to do so because of his relationship, A, with Urban Meyer, who coached him at the University of Florida, and B, again, because North Florida loves them some Timmy Tebow. North Florida football fan will be more excited to see Tim Tebow on the sidelines than they will be excited to see Trevor Lawrence on the football field. The cynic in me creates a lot of elbow room here because as a University of Tennessee alum, I do not have a lot of love for little Timmy Tebow. Honestly, I'm trying to look at this critically. Tebow says that he's playing tight end as an homage to his former teammate, Aaron Hernandez. I think there's something admirable in that. Here's a guy who is reuniting with his old coach, honoring one of his former teammates on those national championship Florida teams. So I'm trying to be the bigger man about it. It doesn't hurt knowing that if Tim Tebow takes the field as a tight end for the Jacksonville Jaguars, he'll be killing any chance that that football team has in staying in the city of Jacksonville. Get it? Get what I did there? Maybe this is all part of God's master plan to have the Jacksonville Jaguars become the London Jaguars. The Lord certainly does work in mysterious ways. But I also have to search my feelings here. And I'm not afraid to admit that I'm somewhat jealous. Here Tim Tebow is getting his third crack at a professional career in Major League sports. Regardless of whether or not he deserves it, if you were in his shoes, you'd do the same thing. You'd take the opportunity. Critics be damned, you'd move forward. If the Detroit Lions come knocking on my door in a year after the coaching staff they hired falls completely on their ass and offers me a 1-year, $1 million contract to come and coach the team, what am I going to say? No. I'm going to grab that opportunity in a heartbeat. Yes, the douchey pundits and the Skip Bayless mold will come out and say, hey, this guy is completely unqualified. If he doesn't perform here, he's never going to get another job in this league. Of course, you stupid jackass. I know I'm not qualified. I shouldn't even be here. This is all found money. I can't know whether Tim Tebow feels this way, but the fact of the matter is, if you get the opportunity, if someone's willing to pay you, you say yes. It's probably a larger testament to having a following in the sports community, in social media, in a religious sect, than it is to having any type of talent. But Kim Kardashian has proven you don't need to have any talent to have a large following. Our boy Tim Tebow is just doubling down on as much.
Act 3 Another healthy dose of COVID with a sprinkling of conspiracy theories.
Are you familiar with the principle of Occam's razor? OCCAM, Occam's razor. The simplest explanation is usually the best one. Modern conspiracy theorists think Occam is an asshole. Because everything now is politicized, there are basically two competing theories on the origin of COVID. Leak from a lab in Wuhan, China. Guy purchases bat at an open-air food or flea market. Bat has COVID. Man contracts COVID after consumption. By way of employing Occam's razor, one of these theories is plausible. The other sounds stupid as hell. The guy eats bat theory, it reminded me immediately when I heard it of AIDS. People for years believed that AIDS was derived from having sex with monkeys. We like these somewhat complicated yet terribly simplistic theories whereby person does something, person responsible for a large catastrophic event. Then a multitude of forces come into play to cover it all up. A lot of people like the guy eats bat theory because they think that's the simplest. Guy buys a bat, bat has COVID, guy eats bat, guy gets COVID, guy goes out and infects millions of other people. It's simple. It has some of the auspices of Occam's razor, but at a more fundamental level, it's pretty stupid. If you think about it, Andrew Zimmern started a television program whereby he went all over the world eating weird things. Weird in respect to being raised in the West, right? He wasn't some lone guy eating these weird foods presented to him in these foreign countries, and then all of the natives of those foreign countries just neglected that part of their diet, that particular food. The reason why that show was compelling, the reason why that show was popular, is because the natives did eat those things routinely. What they considered a delicacy, we found repulsive. Andrew Zimmern eats it. Fun is had by all. What's interesting about the bat story is that it ties very closely with the whole Wuhan lab leak theory. in that lab in Wuhan, they were performing these experiments with COVID on, you guessed it, bats. I always thought the lab leak theory made the most sense. Then the entire issue gets politicized because Trump comes out and supports the lab leak theory. Does he do this in a sophisticated, elegant, tactful way? Of course not. The man is entertaining. The man is also a clumsy boob with words. His overtures had insinuations of culpability, perhaps even jingoistic or national racial overtones. But that Donald Trump was one of the people that trumpeted, see what I did there? This theory does not mean that it's not accurate. Look, if Trump wanted to blame China, why would he go with a bat? Why would they continue to focus on the bat? The easiest way to blame China and to get unconditional, bipartisan, multi-religious, multi-racial, multi-party, multicultural, united Western support is to say that it came from a dog. You heard me, that it came from a dog. Guy goes to open air food market, guy buys dog, guy eats dog, guy gets COVID. You want to rally the people? You want to see a puritanical suburban uprising? Go and tell the people that the Chinese ate Fido, and that's the reason why COVID blew up in everybody's face. We all know that the Chinese do eat dogs. I personally find nothing reprehensible about this. But people in the West, they love them some dogs. You think about the George Floyd protests. What if you could throw in some Madras into that crowd? What if you could throw in a cardigan? How about a sweater vest? Where are your bow ties? Where's the fedora? COVID caused by the Chinese slaughter of dogs? Boom, you've got yourself a social uprising. It'd be like if the government mandated that Starbucks could no longer sell the macchiato latte. The people would take to the streets. But I digress. Okay, the information that's being released specific to the Wuhan lab theory is interesting because it implicates not simply the Chinese, but it implicates the United States of America, the World Health Organization, the National Institute of Health, and one Dr. Anthony Fauci. This is where the principle of Occam's razor comes truly into play. What is the most simple solution? What is the shortest line between 2 points? Well, dangerous experiments are dangerous. Labs, doctors, they want to perform these in the United States, but there's always these stupid public policy considerations. What if people find out? What if there's a leak? What if people get sick? Okay, well, that doesn't mean that these experiments can't be performed. It just means they can't be performed here in the United States. So what we here in the United States need is a cooperative actor. We need to find a partner that wants to conduct these types of experiments as much as we do, that wants the data, that wants to try to find different types of solutions to viruses, but might not have the same public policy considerations that you'd find in a Western democratic country. Thank God for the commies! Thank God for the commies! It's like a perverted version of that Life cereal commercial from the late 70s. Children, consult the YouTube. Simply type in Mikey, M-I-K-E-Y, likes it. As a youth, I watched many a Mikey Likes It commercial. So much so that yes, Life cereal was actually purchased and present in my own home. Brilliant ad. But now as an adult you realize Mikey really didn't like it. Mikey was a child actor getting paid to spoon that filthy shit into his mouth. The facts of life never change, folks. The U.S. wants to perform a bunch of highly dangerous experiments on viruses. Where are we going to do that? How are we going to make sure that no one finds out, that it stays safe? Well, rather than go through the logistical and procedural burdens ourselves, we'll just export it. Hey, what's this stuff? Oh, It's a highly dangerous experimental form of a COVID virus. You want to manipulate it and try to find a cure? No, I'm not going to do that. Are you going to do that? No, I'm not going to do that. Hey, let's get China to do it. Yeah, China will do anything. Look, China likes it. Yeah, China likes it. China also likes the millions and millions of dollars that the United States forwarded to them in order to support this quote-unquote research. Now, this may come as a surprise to many of you, but communists can't always be trusted. Now, I know what you're saying. You're wagging your finger right now. Oh, don't you be so judgmental. But it's true. Communists can't always be trusted. The nation that's willing to put an experimental lab that close to a population with millions of people, you might not be able to trust them. A communist nation that's hacked into pretty much every level of government in the United States, every business entity in the United States, every bank in the United States, well, you might not be able to trust them. So when you want to partner with someone in order to see the results of highly dangerous experimental research, you can't turn around and say, well, you know what, we gave them this money and we were working with them, but we had these strict protocols that we demanded they follow in order to keep the money flowing. And when we went and checked, well, they were following those protocols. Oh, that makes perfect sense. You must have gone through a very thorough inspection process, correct? A tour of the facility, independent quality control checks on equipment, on the storage facility in particular, a review of the safety protocols of the lab technicians, the doctors, the administrators, a thorough review of all of the electronic safety control devices in the facility. No. So what we did was we asked them if they were following the protocols, and they said yes. Wait, what? Yeah. So we went over to the lab, and they sat down with us in a room that was completely siphoned off from the rest of the facility, and we asked them, hey, you know, we're giving you all this money, and we told you that we wanted you to follow all these protocols. Did you follow all these protocols? And you know what they said when we asked them that? They said yes. Wow. That is reassuring. What I'm going to do personally is drink a bottle of tequila, and then I'm going to get into my automobile, naked mind you, without wearing my seatbelt. I'm going to drive my automobile at 100 miles per hour down the freeway. When the officer pulls me over, he's going to say, hey, were you driving 100 miles per hour? And I'm going to say, no, I was not. And he's going to say, are you naked? And I'm going to say, no, sir, I am not. Are you wearing your seatbelt? Yes, I am. Are you drunk? No, sir. No, I am not. I fully expect that over a matter as trivial as my speeding down the highway, naked, with no seatbelt on, under the influence of alcohol, I fully expect to be allowed to go on my way and traverse the highways of America. Occam's razor, folks. When you hear some bullshit that is that stupid, you know something's wrong. Fauci, the NIH, the WHO, all of those organizations are implicated in this Wuhan lab leak. So if you want to understand why it's become such a sore subject, such a political hotbed of controversy, so partisan, it's because the U.S. is actually implicated. Many of the politicians involved are implicated. Dr. Anthony Fauci is implicated. And these people have to throw shit at one another in public without admitting to the underlying fact. What is that underlying fact? There's a term of art called gain of function research. I'm not going to get into all the details of it. You can go and Google it. You'll find more information than you ever wanted to read on any topic. The point is, the underlying fact is that this COVID virus is going to be the rationale for governments around the world to try to fail up. We've talked about this concept before in other podcasts. Failing up. making mistakes through ignorance, through negligence, hell, willfully and wantonly, then turning around and using the problems, the issues created by those mistakes as a reason to bolster the very foundation of your power. And in fact, in this current circumstance, it's to increase the ability to perform the types of experiments that led to the Wuhan lab leak. We have to look at this from the perspective that this isn't a biological warfare lab. These folks aren't trying to infect other human beings with diabolically derived viruses. In order to try to stop a highly contagious pathogen, you have to actually do experiments on it. The problem is that it's very easy for any of the people doing these experiments or the facility itself to have a leak, to have infections. So here you have the United States funding a communist country who basically gave us the finger when it came to all the safety protocols it was supposed to be following. That middle finger leads to a leak. That leak causes a global pandemic, and the solution to the global pandemic is to spend billions and billions of additional dollars doing the same types of experiments that led to the leak. This is not a conspiracy. This is Occam's razor in play. This is the government failing up. All of the people that we're supposed to be relying on to manage this pandemic are culpable in causing the pandemic. There should be no bipartisanship here. There should be no political infighting. But because we so want to believe in conspiracy theories, we so want to implicate the quote-unquote other side, we're buying into this bullshit. As I've said in other podcasts, it's not the politicians. It's us. We are allowing ourselves to be corralled this way, like sheep, fighting over things that are irrelevant. It doesn't matter which politician says what. What matters is whether or not we are going to, in the face of this global pandemic, create an infrastructure with billions and billions and billions of dollars to continue the types of experiments that caused a global pandemic. I have no doubt that because of the politicization of this issue, they're going to be able to do more and more of these types of experiments with the backdrop of we're trying to prevent the next global pandemic. I'm not concerned with whether or not they're going to be able to cure the next virus. I'm concerned whether or not they're going to allow another one to leak out. And you want to know why I'm cautious? Because they already let one leak out. There should be punishment involved for those that made such grievous errors, not rewards. This is Why I Don't Vote, a podcast.